One of the things that you should not have to worry about is getting a good job after you get your first job. I know there's going to be exceptions to that point, but if you go in and you apply some of the things that we're about to talk about, I think that it'd be very unusual that you will literally have to go look for another job for the rest of your life. So, regardless of the so called best practices, the more experienced leader, if they are effective, because experience does not always mean effectiveness, but if we could marry experience and effective together, they are the ones who typically hire people that they already know and trust. In other words, everyone is being interviewed for a new opportunity all the time, but the best of the best rarely have to formally apply to anything. I have been looking forward to recording this podcast for several weeks now, if not a couple of months. And I anticipate having similar podcasts like this one today, but also in the more interview format that I also enjoy doing. But today it's just me. But I want to dedicate this podcast to young adults, to young leaders. Regardless of your age or your station in life, I think that you will gain value in this podcast. But I want to specifically reach out to the young adult, the young leader. That is my intention, and so my comments will be slanted in that direction. I've always enjoyed working with leaders, and so my assumption is that you are beginning, or you have not been in the marketplace for that long, or you are entering into the marketplace. Maybe you have your first leadership role in the marketplace. Maybe you are beginning an entrepreneurial venture. Maybe you are entering into the ministry. Whatever the case, I assume that you've got a certain level of ambition. I'm also going to assume at some level that you are a person of faith. I'm not going to get real specific about that as of right this moment, but at least believing that there's more to life than just this life. And with that worldview in mind, I want to encourage you, first of all, if you have ambition to be a leader in this world today, to make a difference, to try to, all those cliches, make the world a better place, et cetera, then you've got to be a reader. And as a reader, I just want to encourage you not to be a narrow reader, but to read broadly. When it comes to leadership, of course, some of the more popular names today, or like Patrick Lencioni, just about everything that Patrick writes, I read. I enjoy the way he thinks. He is a person of faith. A lot of people in the marketplace maybe don't even realize that, but he is. The Advantage is a really strong book. The one that I have here on my desk right now in front of me is The Four Obsessions of an Extraordinary Executive. It's a leadership fable that he wrote to describe some disciplines that are much needed in leadership. Another one, of course, is Jim Collins, the infamous Good to Great, and some of his other writings is, in my opinion, a necessity for anybody who is looking to lead in an organizational capacity. But I'd even go back farther than that and mention The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. I would say that book in my late 20s is the one that caught my attention the most. So all of this reading that you're doing is a great thing, and I'm gonna get very specific about some advice that I have for you as a young adult, as a young leader. But before I dive into that, I would like to also encourage you not to forsake the reading of Scripture, Christian Scripture. I don't know that I have really read anything of great depth anywhere that I haven't found somehow laid out foundationally in Scripture. What I'd like to do is I'd like to start off with teaching about business and about leadership, actually out of one of the Gospels in Matthew chapter 25. Now, let me give you the context. Jesus is differentiating between one mindset and another mindset, between one worldview and another worldview. And specifically, what he's doing is he's telling parables, he's telling stories to illustrate how the kingdom of heaven works. Now, I don't want you to be thinking that the kingdom of heaven is up there beyond the clouds. The kingdom of heaven is on earth today in the sense of God is with us, in the sense of establishing kingdom mindsets, eternal mindsets. And Jesus teaches about these. One of them is called the parable of the talents. I'm not going to read all of it, but I do want to use this to lay a foundation for some of the advice that I would like to share, and hopefully it'll be a blessing to you. In Matthew chapter 25, Jesus starts off the parable this way. Speaking of the kingdom of heaven, for it is just like a man going on a journey. He called his own servants to himself and turned over his possessions to them. I'm going to pause there just for a minute. In theological terms, we believe as Christians is that anything that we have been given actually comes from God. Our time, our talent, and our treasures. All of these things really belong to God. But he turns over those things to us. He entrusts those things to us to steward. So the talents that you have are from God. The time that you have is from God. The money that you have is from God. All right, so that's the first principle. And then he goes on and he pulls three servants out, three team members, we call them today, and he gives to one of them 5 talents, to the other 2 talents, and to the other 1. A talent was a large sum of money. And again, don't get caught up on the money. This is an illustration of resources. So to one, he gave 5 times resources, the other 2 times resources, and another good chunk of resources. And he says he gave them each according to his own ability. So we don't need to get down about that. What we need to realize is that God does distribute in ways where some people get more than other people, at least to start with. So you might want to make a note of that. One of the things that you should not have to worry about is getting a good job after you get your first job. I know there's going to be exceptions to that point, but if you go in and you apply some of the things that we're about to talk about, I think that it'd be very unusual that you will literally have to go look for another job for the rest of your life. So I'm going to get a little sarcastic here, especially if you have a business degree, and I hope that my HR friends won't get upset with me about this, but I do have to be open and honest in regards to mentoring and sharing advice to our young leaders. So regardless of so-called best practices, right? That's a word that's out there today. If you've been in the marketplace, you've heard that term. If you've been in business school, you've heard that term. And not just business school, in other fields, the medical field and whatnot, you will hear the term best practices. So regardless of the so-called best practices that many HR professionals teach and preach, regardless of those, the more experienced leader, if they are effective, because experience does not always mean effectiveness, but if we could marry experience and effective together, they are the ones who typically hire people that they already know and trust. In other words, everyone is being interviewed for a new opportunity all the time. But the best of the best rarely have to formally apply to anything. So with that in mind, let me jump off and share some advice to you, and I hope this is a blessing to you. I hope it helps. I would encourage you that if you're not in a place to write down some of these things, that you would come back to the podcast, listen to it, and write down some of the things that make a lot of sense to you. So the overarching idea that I want to share with you right now is to do your job as if you were the owner of that business, if you were the founder of that ministry. If you were in the first chair, so to speak, that's an orchestra term, right? First chair, second chair. If you're the one that's kind of leading the pack, do your job as if you were the owner. Now, indeed, you are the owner of your job, and you should bring that mindset, to work every day. And that would be a great place in itself, but that's not exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, yes, I would say approach your job as if it were a standalone business. I mean, that'd be a great start to do that. Think about it that way. And so how would you do that? How do you do that? Well, it all starts on how you think, what you notice, and what you do. Let me say that again. You want to view your job as your own business, and you want to graduate to where you do your job as if you were the owner of that business. And the way to do that is it starts on how you think, what you notice, and what you do. Here's what we do. Start by asking yourself this question. What are the key responsibilities and distinctions between an owner and an employee? I want you to think about that for a minute. Well, I'm just going to list some. I'm going to share some. I don't say that this is an exhaustive list, but an owner sees everything. If an owner is present within their ability, an owner sees everything and cares about everything within the business. So do you? Do you see everything that the owner sees? Do you care about everything that the owner cares about? Second, an owner has more risk. Typically, they have liabilities in various forms or contracts. What concerns me about some of our new leaders coming into the ranks is that we might view certain businesses as something that owes you something that owes me something. And I think what happens is that we forget that these people or their families started these companies most of the time with nothing. They risked everything. This is who they are. And they owe you nothing. They owe you zero. An owner has more at risk. Typically, they have liabilities in various forms of contracts, like leases, mortgages, and they have collateral that they have put up that is at stake. That if the business goes belly up, they can't just simply walk away from the leases and the mortgages and other contracts. Many times, they have collateral that they have put up to the lender. And when they don't, certainly their credit and their future is at stake if the business fails. Now, if you've just graduated from business school and you think that because they have started an LLC or a C Corp or an S Corp or any of these other ideas and that protects them, that's the difference between school and reality. Lenders understand that, and they're smarter than that. They're going to protect themselves, and they're going to require things out of the norm, like personal guarantees and collateral of different nature. You need to understand, folks, that business owners, small to medium-sized business owners, these folks have it all on the line.